You're sitting in the confessional. Old wood, the smell of melted wax, silence that has weight. You've been at this parish 3 weeks and you've already learned that the silence here has texture. The silence of the poor, the silence of those who pray without hope, the silence of those who walk in because they have nowhere else to go. You know that silence. You come from it. You've been carrying it in your shoes since before you arrived. Someone comes in. No smell of sweat. No smell of labor or gasoline or burnt food. They smell of expensive leather and something else you don't have a name for yet. They sit. They don't kneel right away. They wait, the way someone waits who's used to making others wait for them. Then they speak. They speak quietly, calmly, with the cadence of someone who has had this conversation before, not with you, but with themselves, many times, in the silences that settle between big decisions. They confess things to you that a normal man wouldn't name even in the dark of his own room. You listen. It's your job. You don't ask questions because the sacrament doesn't require them. You listen, you absolve, you assign penance. The wooden grill between you does the rest. They leave without another word, without looking back. 3 days later, the parish receives an anonymous donation. Cash, delivered in an unmarked envelope through a messenger who gives no information and disappears before you can ask. The roof stops leaking that same week. The kids at the community food pantry get protein for the first time in months. Your superior calls and congratulates you on your pastoral work. He says the community is responding, that God provides. You say yes. You don't explain why. Because there's nothing to explain, you tell yourself. The sacrament is sacred. What you heard dies with you and with him and with no one else. God's grace moves resources through channels we don't always understand. That's what you tell yourself. The man comes back the following Friday. Same time, alone. And the Friday after that. And the one after that. Always the same schedule, always the same expensive leather, always the same calm of someone who knows that no one in this room can repeat what they hear. You think you're the instrument of his peace. You're actually the only place in the world where he can speak without consequences. You already recognize his footsteps. That should unsettle you more than it does. But 4 months have passed, and there are things you normalize without noticing. The Friday schedule, the smell, the way the bench creaks differently when it's him sitting down. You recognize him before he opens his mouth. Your body knows before your mind does. The confessions get heavier. At first they were abstract things, the weight of decisions, fear of divine judgment, the loneliness of power. Now they're situations, real ones, with texture, orders that were given, consequences that were accepted. People who are no longer around, and he says it exactly that way, no longer around, as if the absence is all that matters and not the cause. All of it wrapped in the language of genuine repentance, or in something so close to it, you can't tell the difference. You listen, you don't ask, you absolve. Outside the church, the neighborhood starts changing in ways that aren't obvious but that you see because you've been here for months and you know the texture of the street. Nobody bothers the parishioners when they leave at night. The parish stays outside of certain problems that are tearing other parts of the city apart. No graffiti on the walls, no break-ins in the courtyard, no drunks fighting in front of the door. As if someone put an invisible boundary around the building and everyone who walks inside it. He treats you with a strange kind of reverence. It's not performance. It's not the automatic deference people usually show priests out of habit or cultural conditioning. It's real respect, the kind that gets earned and given with full awareness, and that, paradoxically, weighs on you more than indifference would. Your mother calls on a Sunday afternoon. She says she heard your parish is flourishing, that the kids are eating well, that the community is tight-knit. She asks if you're happy. You say yes. You don't explain why it's flourishing, not because you can't, but because the path of explanation leads to places you're not ready to go yet. Then the agent shows up. He attends a Tuesday Mass, which is already strange because Tuesday Mass is small and the people who come are always the same. He stays until the end, waits for the parishioners to leave. He approaches with all the courtesy in the world, a smile that never reaches his eyes, and asks if anyone interesting frequents your parish. He says the word interesting with a specific kind of care, like he chose it after sitting with it for a while. You say no. You say it without thinking too hard, because in that moment, it's the easiest answer, and because the sacrament protects you, and because technically, you're not lying. You're protecting a secret that isn't yours to give. That's what you tell yourself. But the more honest truth is this. In that moment, without fully knowing it, you already picked a side. The boss arrives one Friday and doesn't start with the confession. He sits, pauses, and then asks you, with the same calm he uses for everything, whether anyone has come around asking about him. He doesn't threaten you. He doesn't change his tone. He asks the way you ask someone you trust, the way you ask a man who's already proven he can keep his mouth shut, the way you ask someone who is no longer neutral, even if he thinks he is. You have 3 seconds. What you say in those 3 seconds defines everything that comes after. There's no way to not choose. Silence is also an answer, and he knows it. You know it. The wooden grill between you changes nothing in this moment. You confirm, yes, someone came. You didn't say anything. The gratitude doesn't arrive as money. It arrives as something harder to manage. The certainty that this man now owes you something, and he knows it, and you know he knows it. It's a debt with no paperwork and no due date, but it hangs in the air of every conversation you'll have from this point forward. You're no longer a neutral witness protected by the sacrament, you're a participant. The difference is theological, yes, but it's also legal. And the legal difference isn't established by the catechism. Fear changes shape. Before, you were afraid of making a mistake within your role as a priest. Now you're afraid of the consequences of what you've already done. That's different. The first fear has a remedy. You can avoid making the mistake. The second has no remedy because the mistake already happened and lives in the past, where nothing can reach it except the consequences. The agent comes back. This time, it's not a Tuesday conversation after Mass. There's a formal appointment. There are documents, written questions, and there's a lawyer sitting beside him who is not yours, who works for the government, and who watches you with the patience of someone who has time and resources and no need to rush. They explain that you have religious immunity. They say it like it's a favor. But they say it with the tone of someone building something around you, brick by brick, who is simply waiting for the structure to get high enough before showing you the full picture. You leave that meeting and walk 4 blocks before going back into the church. That night, you pray more than usual, not for him, for yourself. And in that prayer, in that honesty that only exists when you're alone in the dark, there is the first real admission that something went very wrong, and that you have no map out. Your superior calls you to his office on a Wednesday morning. He says the diocese received a visit. He doesn't specify from whom. He says they're concerned about your safety, that perhaps a temporary reassignment would be the wisest move, that there are other parishes that need pastoral attention, that this isn't a punishment, it's a precaution. You listen, you know what it means. It means the institution already knows that something is orbiting around you, and that the institution, like any structure that wants to survive, is calculating how much distance it needs to avoid getting burned too. The boss knows there's pressure too. He doesn't tell you directly, but the confessions change shape again. They're no longer repentance. They're something closer to instructions dressed up as a troubled soul. Pray for those who have to make hard decisions, he says. Pray for those who don't have the option of stepping away in peace. You understand. He knows you understand. The grill between you is no longer a divider. It's almost a bridge. Staying means the parish you've built over these months, the community that knows you, the kids at the food pantry, your brother who comes to visit and says you look good, even though he notices something he can't quite put into words yet. Your brother comes one weekend. He sleeps in the guest room off the sacristy. Sunday night, before he leaves, he looks at you for a beat longer than normal and says, "You look different." He doesn't mean it in a bad way, just different, like someone carrying something they weren't carrying before. You say it's the work, that you're tired. You're not entirely lying. The boss misses 2 Fridays in a row without any heads up. No message, no explanation. He just doesn't come. And in that absence, you discover something about yourself. You feel something. Not relief, which would be the right answer. Something closer to unease, like when a part of the world that had become predictable stops being predictable. When he comes back, something in him has changed. Colder, more tired, like someone who just watched something end that he thought could last longer. He sits down heavier than usual. The confession that day is longer, more specific, with details that used to stay on the surface. That night you can't sleep. Not because what you heard is new. You've already heard heavy things in that confessional. But because for the first time you understand that he also knows this is heading toward an end, and that he's using these conversations differently now, not to unburden his soul, to leave a record of something, and you're the only archive that exists. The court order arrives on a Thursday morning, not to arrest you, to question you. Your attorney, who you retained 3 weeks ago when you started to understand you needed one, explains in an office with tall windows and cold light that the seal of confession has legal limits that vary depending on the jurisdiction and the type of information involved and the judge's discretion and a series of other factors he walks you through carefully, all of which basically comes down to this: what you hear in that confessional may not be as protected as the seminary taught you. They never taught you this at the seminary. The government wants what's behind that old wood. They don't say it exactly that way, but that's what they want. Years of investigation, resources, time, and the only thread leading them to where they need to go runs through you, through your memory, through what you heard with your eyes closed and a stole across your shoulders. The boss wants to know how much you know. The diocese wants to survive the scandal. And you're at the center of all three, unable to move in any direction without breaking something you can't fix afterward. If you talk, there's protection, immunity, a way out geographically, a new name, the end of all this. If you don't talk, there's something harder to name but older. Integrity, or what's left of it after months of choosing convenient silence. The vow you made. The promise that's engraved somewhere inside you that hasn't fully gone dark yet. Every path destroys something that can't be rebuilt. You start reading faces at Mass. The man in the third pew you don't recognize who's been there 3 Sundays in a row. The woman taking photos outside the building with a phone aimed in directions too specific to be tourism. You check your cell phone more than you need to. You turn it off and still feel like someone is listening. You take different routes to the parish. You catch yourself doing all of this, and that alone confirms what you don't want to confirm. You already live this way. You already think this way. You already are this. The message arrives on a Wednesday night, not from him directly. Through someone who approaches after Mass and hands you a folded piece of paper with a single handwritten line, "Pray for those who have family." It's not a threat. It's something worse. It's a reminder that he knows you have one, that your mother still calls every Sunday, proud as ever, that your brother visits, that the people you love exist in the same world where he operates. That night, you understand something you don't want to understand. The sacrament you swore to protect became the chain that binds you. And the chain has 2 ends. He holds one, the government holds the other. And neither end is you. He walks in, and you know it before he opens the door. Not from the sound of his footsteps this time, from something harder to explain, from the way the air changes, from something that in another context you'd call intuition, and that in this context is called months of listening to a man who is now at the end of something. He sits with the calm of someone who has already made peace with what's coming. He doesn't start right away. He lets the silence go longer than usual. And when he speaks, it's different. Without the usual detours. Without the layered language he used when there was still something to protect. He confesses to you with names, with dates, with locations, with the full architecture of decisions that for years were the axis of something enormous, and that now, in his voice, sound like a story that's already over even though the world doesn't know it yet. He tells you all of it. You understand as you listen that this isn't repentance, not the kind that looks for absolution. It's something else. It's the act of someone who needs what he lived to exist somewhere outside his own head before everything ends. And he chose this place. He chose you. Not because you're the wisest or the most trustworthy, but because you're the only one who can't repeat it. What you just heard is the most valuable thing anyone has ever given you, and absolutely the most dangerous thing anyone could have put in your hands. You can't use it. Using it would mean breaking the vow and destroying what you are or what you believed yourself to be. You can't ignore it. It's already inside you, engraved with the precision of someone speaking who knows they're speaking for the last time. You can't forget it. It lives in you now, sealed by an oath you no longer know if you're capable of keeping, but that you also don't know how to let go. He leaves without looking at you. No goodbye. No thank you. He leaves the way someone leaves after depositing something in a safe place and walking away with clean hands. You're alone in the confessional. You don't pray. You don't think about the government or your attorney, or the court order, or the folded piece of paper from Wednesday. You simply are. Sitting on the same old wood that smelled of melted wax the first time he walked in. The same silence, but different. Like someone who just understood that some things get carried forever, and that forever is exactly as long as it sounds. Outside, in the courtyard, there's movement. A young priest, newly arrived, walks with a small bag and a smile he hasn't learned to control yet. The sacristan meets him, leads him on a tour of the building with the energy of beginnings. He tells him the community is very special, very close, that there's a lot of support, that he's going to be okay here. The young priest looks at the building with something you recognize because you had it too. Hope. The clean hope of someone who doesn't yet know what he doesn't know. The old wood of the confessional is still there. The candle is still burning. Someone else will sit in that place soon. Someone who will listen, who will absolve, who won't ask questions because the sacrament doesn't require them. And sooner or later, on a Friday, someone will walk in. They won't smell like sweat or labor. They'll smell like expensive leather and something else that won't have a name yet. The machine didn't need any particular priest. It needed the sacrament. It needed the silence. It needed the old wood and the burning candle and someone on the other side who swore to keep what they hear. And the sacrament will always find someone to hold it up.